In this episode, I visit with Utopia-based artist Peggy Vesper. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and today I have with me Peggy Vesper. I met Peggy, I can't remember if it was last weekend or the weekend before, but at the market in Kerrville where she was selling and displaying her artwork. And I asked her if we bought a couple of pieces, my wife and and I really enjoyed her work and her story. I asked her if she'd come on the podcast to visit with us, and she said, sure. So, with that incredibly long winded introduction, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me and welcome, Peggy.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And I should note for the record, you are my first guest from Utopia.
Good.
There you go. So,
there's not that many of us.
Not that many of us. Peggy, could you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and any sort of professional background you have?
Well, I was born in Sacramento, California, grew up in Arizona, everywhere from Phoenix area to Tucson area, and Nogales. Moved to, stayed there until I was 41, I guess. Anyway, moved to Texas 22 years ago, and went to Houston for a job, and married my husband, and then we bought property Hill Country, and 18 years ago. We've gotten down here basically full-time for the last 10 years.
So what intrigued you or interested you and your husband about the Hill Country?
He's a Texas native, so he's always known he wanted to retire and settle down in Texas. He is from Demet County, but we both fell in love with the Hill Country because it's beautiful. I mean, I like the weather. I'm from Arizona, so it's not as hot as, people think. And it's just beautiful. Everywhere you look around, you've got beautiful landscapes and trees, and I love it.
So, why Utopia?
That was just chance. He had a cousin that had a place down here, and we came down for a 4th of July barbecue. And we had been looking at property all over the Hill Country. And when we were down here, of course, we did like we did everywhere else. We called a real estate guy, looked what was for sale, and we found this property. It's 26 acres. And at the time, the house was, well, just run down. It had asphalt shingles on the outside of the house. It was, I don't know, maybe 1,000 square feet or 900 square feet. It was just a broken down house, but I guess it had good bones underneath it. Half the walls were plywood inside. I mean, but I loved it. It had an old garden on it. It had an old broken down greenhouse, and it was in nice views, and I just fell in love with the property. And after the real estate man left, I told my husband, this is the one I want. I just fell in love with it. So we got it, and he's fixed it up.
So we moved out here, my wife and I, a little over 2 years ago, and the only advice I got when looking for a house or property was the following: you'll know it when you see it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you knew it when you saw it.
Oh, I knew it within 10 minutes. I just love the feeling of the place. And where my studio now sits on the property is where the garden and the old greenhouse was. And I just fell in love. I mean, I hadn't even seen the house when I decided that I wanted the property, because that really didn't play into it. I just love the feel. I have beautiful views that look out over the hills in my studio. And I wasn't even painting then. So I was going to be a master gardener then, but I changed.
We were the same way. We looked down a hillside into a valley where the creek is, and then up the other side. And I walked out on the deck, and I just looked at my wife and said, this is it. Turned to the real estate guy and said, okay, whatever the price is, we'll meet it. You want to check now to hold it now? And yeah, it's like every bit of negotiation you could do wrong, I did do wrong, but we got the house.
Well, luckily my husband was in charge. We didn't make an offer right there. He made me wait, but luckily we still got the house. So.
So, when did you start painting? And you tell me about how that interest was it a lifelong interest you finally were able to fulfill, or was it just an evolution of something?
Well, it was a lifelong interest in the fact that I started, art class in high school, and I think I only took one life drawing class in college. That was the only art I ever did. Um, I got practical. I used to want to go to the art shows and display my arts at all these arts and craft fairs. I had several friends that I made by going to the shows, and artists that, would give me tips and such. And I thought they had the most incredible life. And then I had my own apartment and I bought a car, and life got in the way and I started working. And about every 10 years, I would, pick up a brush, and it was hopeless. Just, I never would do more than one painting, and then that was it. I found that when I was working, and I had some high stress jobs, when I'm stressed, I can't paint. So I didn't start painting until I retired 6 years ago. And then
What
it
did
was,
you
go ahead.
what did you retire from?
My last job was we were down here locally, so I needed to find something within, 30, 40 miles, was Bandera Electric Cooperative. So I worked there for, I think, 8.5, 9 years. Before
Where'd
that,
you
I was at ConocoPhillips, and I've done a number of jobs.
Where'd you go to college?
I really didn't. I mean, I did 2 years at two community colleges in Arizona, Glendale Community College and Phoenix Community College, I think they were. But that was long, long, long time ago.
So tell us about when you finally retired and picked up a brush. Where did you start, and where has it gone?
Well, about, I guess, a month into retirement, I decided I better go find a job because I, it wasn't enough. I had a huge garden then, and that was what I was trying to do. And then I decided that, well, get my paints out again. And I had to buy a lot of new ones, actually. And I decided to go with acrylic rather than oil, which I used before. And I love the acrylic because I paint quickly, and I'm not a patient person. And so I loved it because all of a sudden, if you made a mistake, you could just do it over again. And so acrylic and I fell in love. But I had a niece who had recently lost one of her dogs. They're dog breeders for rat terriers. And she wanted me to do a dog for her mother. And I said, I've never painted a dog in my life. I had used to do some people, and Indians were real big back in the day when I was painting in the 70s. So anyway, I said, I'll try. And she showed me, had a picture of this dog in a field of bluebonnets. So I did it, and it was okay, but she loved it, and her mother loved it. And then they came to me, and they had two other friends that had just lost their dogs. And so I painted for them. And then I had a neighbor who wanted her dogs done. And so I fell into doing pet portraits. I decided, well, if I'm going to be doing these, I might as well be charging for them, because I quickly realized that art can be a very expensive hobby with everything that you want, especially if you like all the new toys, which I always do. So I started doing pet portraits, and they talked me into doing the first arts and craft show I've done in Utopia, a little local one. And I was scared to death. And I set up, didn't have any big setup. I borrowed a tent from a friend, and we had some, I guess they were wire shelves, long ones. And so we made them into a teepee and hung my artwork from it. And that was my very first show. And it just sort of grew from then. I was told about a class that a really great artist, Guy Morrow, he has a house in Utopia, but he's mainly out of, I think it's Corpus or Port Aransas. I'm not sure which. And he would come to Utopia and usually do 2 shows a year. And what it was a 3-day painting workshop. And then we'd do some plein air painting, which is the outdoor painting, for the weekend. And I met a lot of great artists. Don Darst, he has a beautiful studio in Helotes, which sometimes I do show at. Anyway, learned a lot, and there my hill country landscape started as I started expanding and getting away from pet portraits. And that was probably about 5 years ago. And now I've just grown. I continued his workshops once or twice a year, and I've done a couple other workshops, and I'm painting.
And that's what I really enjoyed was the landscapes of your work that you showed here in Kerrville. Last summer on the 4th of July, in Hunt, Texas, there was a art fair of Hunt-based artists. And from one of the things I learned from that was the vibrant art community in Hunt. Is there a similar vibrant art community in Utopia? Recognizing it's a small community, you still have several folks that show regularly, or do you really go to a broader kind of hill country community for that sort of thing?
Well, Utopia has now expanded, and we do a spring and a fall arts and craft fair, which I will always participate in just because it's part of my community. And actually, we get quite a few people from all over, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, smaller communities like Uvalde and Lakey. And so I've been doing their shows, I guess, for 4 years. I Wine Arts Fair in Comfort. I used to we have a winery here, and I used to do a once a month market, and I set up there, and I actually for 2 years did a lot of showings there, and sometimes I would set up other times because it was quite busy, but that sort of has fallen off. And so I'm looking for new venues, which is why I tried the Kerrville one, because I like to set up once a month. It sort of gives me the people time I need, and also I have a fairly small studio here, and I can only hang so much artwork, so I need to sell it. Even though I do sell through my website and at Facebook, and I developed a local audience, I guess, of people who do buy my art, and some of their friends from out of town buy it. So I turn my art pretty quickly.
So let me explore the landscapes with you a little bit, because I said that was what I really enjoyed. What drew you to landscapes, and any sort of strategies, tactics you use, or you just either paint what you see or paint what you want to see?
Combination. I'll take usually most of my paintings, and not all, sometimes they'll be total fictional things, but most of my paintings is based off of a photograph. But once a painting gets going, it sort of turns into whatever it's going to turn into. I know that sounds silly, but I don't know how else to explain it, because I can start thinking I'm going to paint one thing, and it's something totally different. Like all of a sudden a pathway will emerge, or a stream, or, so you add to it. And the exception of that is I do a lot of commission work for people that have views or something landscape, in my wheelhouse of painting, and they want to have it done. And so I try to stick closer to it, maybe not color wise, but closer to the landscape they're trying, because it's usually a view from their front window or something like that.
So just for those listening on audio, you can't see what I can see. But if you're watching on YouTube, behind Peggy are several of her landscapes, two of which I really enjoy: the sunset, and then along the river as well. And so I was wondering, let's start with the sunset, with that gorgeous picture of the clouds, the sun reflecting off the clouds. Could you tell us a little bit about that one?
That is actually a view from my my house. we have.
Well, now I am jealous.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, my living room, the house isn't situated where I get to look out my window and see that exact view. My window looks out over the east, so I do see some incredible sunrises. But if you just go to the side of our property and we put a bench there, and there's many a night or evening that I've sat there and photographed sunsets. So I've done a lot of them. Also, I have lots of neighbors that are on the hillside around me. They didn't used to be there, but now are there. And they send me pictures of sunsets, or when I go up to their house for a party, I take pictures. So I do a lot of the Sabinal Canyon, which is where we're in. I've done a lot of landscapes and views, and most of my commissions have been in this area too, from people that own houses in the different areas surrounding Utopia.
And I think the left of that sunset is another picture I really enjoyed, which is a creek or a river with a sunrise over that.
Sorry. That one?
No, go the other way. There it is in the corner.
Oh, yes. That is the Sabinal River when we had a lot of water in it. I did a commission work, which was a large piece, a 3x4. And I opened up, we have a little Utopia Facebook page community. And I opened up I said I have a commission work, and the only qualification is it has to be of the Sabinal River, and ask anyone to submit a photograph of the Sabinal River. And so I got a huge response. I couldn't believe that we have that many. And we have two really incredible photographers that I know of in this area. And they both submitted pictures. And so that one you saw was one that somebody submitted to me. But I've done a lot of them. And I love photographs. I always encourage all my friends or anyone I see at shows to do photographs. In fact, at the show you were in, I met a nice young man who was a photographer, and I had recently come back from Big Bend, and so I was doing some paintings of Big Bend, and he showed me one of the Santa Helena Canyon, and that's on my easel now, and I'm close to getting done with it. So it's great. I get pictures and photographs from all over.
Peggy, what would you say for the teenager, the high school student, or anyone literally up to our age about following the passion of art and sort of from your perspective?
Well, I think everyone should follow their dream. My daughter switched from a business major to a fine arts major because she is an extremely talented artist also. And I wasn't happy. I mean, I am a mother, and very few people can earn, I think, a living on art unless they keep after it and do it and do it. And now I have people my age that are definitely earning great livings from it. But I think everyone, it's a call. It's what you want to do. But don't ever let it die. I mean, my daughter has 3 children, and like she told me, she goes, I really am so glad you're doing it, because it makes me realize once all these kids are gone, I'll be able to take art back. She goes, because I don't have time to paint now. And so it's just, don't ever give up on it. I think it's something you should always try. And eventually, you might be doing what you've always wanted to do. I am. I'm going to shows and I'm selling my artwork. And so I'm thrilled about it.
Peggy, I saw on your website there are arts and crafts fair days in Utopia in May. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's the first Saturday of May. So off the top of my head, I'm not sure what it is. I think it's the 6th, but I'm not sure. And the next one will be in November. And if you're really interested in art, the Comfort Art Show, which is September, it's mid-September. And I couldn't even find the date myself yet on it, is always an incredible art show, and it draws lots of very, very good artists. And I've been setting up there this will be my 5th year, I believe. And I'm trying a new one this year in Ingram. which Ingram is by Kerrville, and they have, it's called the Texas Art Festival, and it's a 2-day affair. And I've submitted my application. It is juried, which means, I may or may not get in, but hopefully I will. And if so, I'm going to be in that one this year. That's also in September. It's a week after. It's the last Saturday and Sunday of September.
Peggy, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, if our listeners wanted more information on yourself or your art, what would be the best place for them to go?
2 places. I do keep a web page up, and it's pvesperart.com. And that you can always contact me through that site. It always lists what shows I have coming up. And usually my most current artwork, the first place I do post, however, is on Facebook, and it's Peggy Vesper Art. And that runs a little bit more current. I mean, I've sometimes sold things before it gets to my web page. And also I do use an Instagram, which again is Peggy Vesper Art. And I don't post there as much, but I'm trying to, get up to speed on that too. Peggy? Or you can call me or email me or text me. I mean, my phone number is all over my web page and my Facebook page. It's totally public. And I always enjoy hearing from people about art.
Well, Peggy, I enjoyed meeting you at the Kerrville show. I've enjoyed this, and I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me. And I look forward to seeing you again at your next show.
Well, I will be back in Kerrville in April, so come on by.
Thanks again, Peggy.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
This is Tom Fox again. Thank you so much for listening to the award-winning Hill Country Podcast. I hope you'll check out Peggy's website. She's got some really interesting stuff, particularly around landscapes, which I just love. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode of the Hill Country Podcast. The Hill Country Podcast is a production of the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network.